So this is 13:20 GMT on Wednesday, the 30th of September 2020. Now we've got one day we didn't do the diagnosis, which was Tuesday, the 29th of September 2020. And the reason is logistical. As we have been saying, this is the series of broadcasts. The contents are normal, but the actual installations and the logistical issues remain under review, and we are working to make sure that the logistical issues do not cause any interruptions to the programs when we start scheduled broadcasts. This is coming to whoever is watching this from the Kudilar campaign. Kudilar campaign is the campaign defending the community in the East End of London, originally started in December 2003 by myself and Kay Jordan deciding to launch this campaign. And the initial destination of our campaigning attention and the focus was the local Tower Hamlets Council. London Borough of Tower Hamlets Council is the council that has within its territory, physical territory, the Tower of London. So anyone who is not in London or is not familiar with London should have an idea as to about roughly where Tower Hamlets is. It's the borough that has the Tower of London within its boundary, just about. And it is to the east of the smaller city of London, what is also called the Square Mile. And is the city of London, which is the center of the financial activities of this country. And the records, increasing evidence shows that the city of London as a financial capital is also the capital of the UK, being treated by big beast criminals from overseas as an offshore destination. In addition to the city of London, Tower Hamlets Borough itself has what is called the Isle of Dogs. That name is not in use anymore, not as often as it used to be. That name is for an island in the borough of Tower Hamlets, island that is surrounded by a kind of long line of the River Thames around the area. And it has locations where many of the ocean-going, sea-going vessels used to have their kind of port. So various little ports inside were called the wharves. And the wharves are including the most widely known one, Canary Wharf. And there are other wharves as well in there. And wharf is a singular and wharves is a plural. So Tower Hamlets now has Canary Wharf dominating the area, which used to be the Isle of Dogs, and it is now part of the area in Tower Hamlets and in Newham, and part of Greenwich and the south of the river called Docklands. Now we shall be devoting longer discussions about Docklands, Tower Hamlets, Newham, and the history of these areas and the wharves and the current state of degeneration being perpetrated by various big business interests and agencies and forces that are using the 2 or 3 local councils immediately in the kind of geographical area consisting of or constituting the area also known as the Docklands. There is a Docklands railway line Docklands railway line was started in the late 1980s. And the 1980s was still fronted by Margaret Thatcher and her one of her cabinet ministers, Michael Heseltine, who later kind of became an anti-Brexiteer. I mean, he still is an anti-Brexiteer, but he's much mellowed now, all these years later, nearly 50 years later. But in the late 1980s, the Isle of Dogs, which was part of the London Docklands Development Corporation, was converted into an area that was given over to big business from overseas and other countries, including the big banks. And that was done by the initiative of Michael Heseltine. And as part of the same initiative, they allowed the Canary Wharf to be built and the big businesses moved in. And they didn't have to comply with any of the ordinary planning regulations, so-called. The planning regulations have never been really regulations as they should be in the country, in Britain. And so therefore, the regulations that exist for most of the building works through the local councils in the areas are performing about 20% of the regulatory duties and powers that they should exercise against degenerating developers. Degenerating developers are really degenerators, not developers, but they operate under the general kind of label of developers. Developments, they construct buildings. And most of these buildings are anti-environmental and they're anti-social, anti the local communities. So because of that, London has been covered in high, tall buildings. And most of the tall buildings proportionately in terms of the area covered by the geographical area covered by the given local authority, and in terms of the number of people living in the borough corresponding to the name of the local authority, in this case Tower Hamlets, they have Tower Hamlets has been the site or scene or sites and scenes of the largest number proportionately of high-rise buildings in the last 20 years. And this is a condemnation of the lack of democracy and lack of kind of rigorous analysis by the local council. And Tower Hamlets Council, on the record, not because of my preference for calling it crooked, but Tower Hamlets Council is one of the most corrupt local councils in all of England and in all of the UK. And that is evident in the fact that all these big buildings outside of the Docklands, London Docklands Development Corporation's area, which is the area that is also the Docklands now, the Canary Wharf, and the other various sub-names that have been given to this area. The rest of Tower Hamlets, outside of Canary Wharf, outside of the Isle of Dogs, has been the victim of the corrupt Tower Hamlets Council in every respect, in every area that is not respect, every part of the duties owed to the community and to individuals by Tower Hamlets Council has been a letdown, a betrayal, and a wrong done against the community and against the individuals. None of this is, of course, covered in the Fleet Street newspapers or the British newspapers, or even by the so-called local variety, which is an embarrassment in itself. The East London Advertiser, which is a complete, utter, absolute crime. Every issue of the East London Idiotizer is an issue that praises the crooks in the council. Crooks in the council are fronted by the racist criminal, John Biggs, and other criminals are obviously actively colluding with him and complicit with him. And so the local paper, the Central Fleet Street, that is London-centric, tabloids like the Daily Mail, the Sun, the Star, the Daily Express, the Daily Borisgraph, the Guardian, the Times, and the Financial Times, they don't actually cover the truth about any of this. So what you are watching, whenever you are watching this, whether at this time when it is going out live or at a later time or date, you are watching some completely, absolutely world exclusive information based on ongoing 247 research and investigation by this campaign, the Khudilar campaign. The Khudilar campaign, as I said at the beginning, was begun in December 2003 by myself and K. Jordan. And the agenda of our campaign was to defend the community in terms of the environment, in terms of the political and social kind of composition and control against the attackers. And the attackers have been always big business interests with collusion from the locally cited and locally recruited stooges and surrogates and factotums of all races and backgrounds. And the factotum now is John Biggs, of course, but he was not always there. I mean, in 2003, he was not in post as a leading councillor or leader in Tower Hamlets Council. He was fleecing the public reputation and name and resources by posing as a member for the Newham, Tower Hamlets and City of London area on the Greater London Assembly. And Biggs was, because of the numbers of the Labour Party on the Greater London Assembly, Biggs was given posts various times, including for a long stretch the post of the spokesperson for scrutiny and chair of the scrutiny of the GLA. But the GLA itself is a corrupt, absolutely corrupt and unaccountable, intransparent and undemocratic and anti-democratic outfit, as is the post of the mayor of London at the expense of London, in the name of London. Now, those two things were confected by Tony Blair, and the influence behind that, the lobby behind that, included Ken Lying Still Livingstone, who had been the crook misleading the Greater London Council or the GLC, as a result of which, that is Ken Lying Still Livingstone's misleading at the front of the Greater London Council or the GLC between the years 1981 to 1983-84, Margaret Thatcher, still in post as the occupant at number 10 Downing Street, decided to dismantle the Greater London Council. Of course, she was fed daily information by the conservative members of the GLC, Greater London Council, whose previous kind of stint as the controlling party at the GLC was fronted by Horace Cutler. Horace Cutler was in place in 1978 when Altavali was murdered, and there was a big row about GLC housing racism, as a result of which we combined the energies against racism with the energies that were needed to proactively demand housing human rights, as a result of which the Spitalfields Housing Cooperative was formed in the late 1970s, early 1980s. The Spitalfields Housing Cooperative is no longer there. And this month, September, in 1987, remember the dates. I mean, all these happened in the year 1987. The DLR was established. The Docklands Light Railway was established or started or commenced in 1987. And most of the takeover of the Docklands or the Isle of Dogs was done in the late 1980s, and the year 1987 witnessed a lot of the takeover and a lot of the anti-local kind of arrivals of big business and occupation of the land and grabbing of the land by the big business. Now, Tower Hamlets Council has never been, it is not now, it never has been a pro-democratic local campaign. It has been a kind of platform for petty criminals and self-servers to make a career. And we shall be detailing item by item, name by name, and name by cause and claim and crime. All the appropriate names that are necessary for the full understanding, contextual understanding of how the local democracy is a sham, has been a sham, and has been abused by the bunch of criminals that have been in position successively as councillors. Not every single one of the councillors has been a criminal. Only a few have not been criminals, but most of them have been. As current numbers of the councillors are almost all of them, except the conservative Peter Goulds and the recently retired conservative councillor, now independent councillor, who is Peter Gould's ex-colleague, Andrew Wood. Apart from those, and there is probably one lone kind of artificially created Lib Dem councillor and a particular one that is added. So there are probably two Lib Dem councillors, and probably one councillor who still is identified by association with the thing called Aspire, which is widely reported as being the platform for Lutfur Rahman, who was the incumbent in post as the quote elected mayor until the 23rd of April 2015, when he was kicked out of that post by election commissioner Richard Morey. Anyone watching this for the first time, of course, would have found this totally new, because there is no organ, there is no publication, there is no platform where this set of facts has been put forward. And if there is one, it would be based on copying our work. So here is a legal disclaimer. Everything we publish, and publish means post online, unless it is sourced to a third party, is original world exclusive work by us and by myself, Muhammad Haq. And the purpose of this channel, we don't recruit friends and we don't follow people. That is the policy. If we recruit friends and we follow anyone, it will be announced in due course. But currently, we're just publishing. We are not dependent in any shape or form on anyone following us. If they find us, that is their responsibility. But we don't crave and we don't have any need. And I never have had any need for publicity. So anyone who is looking at this, watching this, and taking notes of this or making any use of the information must acknowledge the source of it, and expressly so. And it is there on the banner that is there, static banner, as well as on the AADHIKAR lines that are running underneath. And we are probably going to be talking about the press item by item, front page by inside page, whatever, later in the editions that follow this particular edition, which is now being recorded at 20 minutes to 2 in the afternoon, in the GMT time in London on Wednesday, the 30th of September 2020. Now, September, as I said, is a month of many anniversaries of actions. And the action that is most relevant to the multi-trillion pound claims that we have against the criminals, multi-trillions. Notice this, multi-trillions. I mean, it is more than the combined resources of the UK publicly, and it is in debt for 2 trillion pounds. So that is the actual kind of amount. And the amount is reached by working out at the lowest possible kind of cost. The losses incurred by and lost by and suffered by and caused to the millions, hundreds of millions of people who have been victims of poverty, victims of hunger, victims of famine, genocide, and so on. And this week, yesterday, that is 29th of September, this preacher man called Anthony Guterres, the United Nations Secretary General, he has been appearing on all the social media platforms of the peddled by the United Nations apparatus or operations. And he has been making speeches and spinning himself as the kind of image of all the good things that the United Nations has been doing and is doing. Now, Anthony Guterres, of course, is a very opportunistic, not 100% honest person. Let's say he's a dishonest, opportunist careerist who was in Portugal, Portuguese politics for a long time. And he has been promoting his image by allowing the claim that he was the most popular and all the other things. He may have been all those things. But the role he is playing as a preacher man in the name of the United Nations on the social media is grotesquely dishonest, because he said that there is a kind of short clip of the Rohingya women being run today on the United Nations, one of the Twitter accounts. And it says, don't forget the Rohingya people. That is grotesque. There was no action. There was no action during the 75th anniversary of the General Assembly, United Nations General Assembly, United Nations 75th anniversary. There was nothing that has been recorded or noticed about the United Nations doing anything against the genocides and against Aung San Suu Kyi, the leader of the genocide. And there is also, has to be said, the fact that in the UK media, American media, the rest of the world media, there is nothing about the genocide. Now, imagine if this genocide had taken place against a European group of European people, and the fraction, even 100,000 people were affected by that genocide, it would be still every day in the papers, in the British papers, the American papers, Western papers, Western media. But the Rohingya people are not on the front pages, inside pages of the British papers or the American papers or the papers from France or Germany, as far as I can see. And the role played by Narendra Modi, the Indian Brahminist, BJP fascist, who has been in power in India for too long, he flew to Burma immediately after the genocide got reported, and immediately after the hundreds of thousands of Rohingya Muslims were forced to flee Burma. He flew to Burma to congratulate Aung San Suu Kyi on her genocide against the Muslims. And this Antonio Guterres, the United Nations Secretary General, went to India and congratulated Narendra Modi. Now, to what extent Guterres and Modi agreed on the extent of the violations of the Rohingyas' human rights and the genocide has not been published. But various coincidental events, various events that happened within very short time of each other, make up the scenario that Guterres was more concerned about ingratiating himself to a demographically large country like India than he was about coming across as opposing, full stop, opposing the genocide against the Burmese and demanding the justice immediately of the genociders. The process, the quest for justice for the Rohingya people continues, and it is nowhere near even 50% done, even 40% done, because all the United Nations Security Council members have been in denial. They have not been actually calling it a genocide. So that is a very significant failing by the United Nations organization. And Guterres has not really done anything to force a difference in approach about the justice that the Rohingyas demand and deserve and must be given to them. The point is that even now as we speak, on Wednesday the 30th of April 2020, Rohingyas are fleeing. Thousands of Rohingyas are in flight, meaning they are desperate and they are not settled and not certain, and they are completely uncertain, unsettled, and their human rights not guaranteed, and they're not being protected. Even in the largest kind of camp that is in Chittagong area, in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh, the Rohingyas' human rights are far from upheld, and Rohingyas are being far from welcome by the political establishment in Bangladesh, which has failed to articulate the connection between the millions of Bangladeshis who had to flee then East Pakistan and take refuges in neighboring India, and the connection between that and the Rohingya people today. And I think that the failure of the Bangladeshi political establishment, political careers, opportunities, and the Bangladeshi media is an indictment on them, because in 1971, Bangladeshis, many hundreds of thousands of Bangladeshis would have been killed if they had not been able to find refuges in India. And that should not have been forgotten, but it seems that in effect, in practice, the Bangladeshi media and the Bangladeshi political establishment have totally forgotten that. And I mean political establishment that includes the government as well as the opposition. So this speech, this statement, this comment is not on behalf of or against a particular party or grouping in Bangladesh. It is an objective, collective, evidential, strictly evidential comment based on the absence of any evidence coming from Bangladesh that shows that the Rohingya people are treated with the respect and the dignity and the solidarity and the compassion that they deserve. Now, the United Nations has been putting out lies, praising collectively the people of Bangladesh for compassionate attitude towards the Rohingyas. That is not substantiated. The Rohingyas have been allowed there because Bangladesh has been financially benefiting, quite without doubt. millions of pounds, hundreds of millions of pounds that have been given to Bangladesh government to help the Rohingya people would not have been available to Bangladesh government ever if the Rohingyas were not there. So the Rohingyas have provided, not that that is what they wanted to do, but the Rohingyas have provided a kind of moral high ground that Bangladesh government or regime can assert internationally. And for that, the Bangladesh government should be eternally grateful to the Rohingya people. And they cannot thank them enough. The Rohingya people should be thanked and embraced as equal human beings with dignity. And their plight should be treated with dignity and respect. Treating people in desperate violation and being violated in Bangladesh is an urgent matter, as is being made again by the latest and the most atrocious violence perpetrated against this young person who is aged under 20 and who was gang raped by what is now being widely reported in Bangladesh, in Bangladeshi papers and media, members of the ruling party's student wing, what is called the Student League or Chhatra League. Now, is there any excuse for that? Is there any word to condemn that? How could that happen? Many of the people speaking against this particular atrocity, gang rape, are saying that for a long time, the Bangladesh authorities, Bangladesh government, Bangladesh institutions have refused to take action against gangs of criminals which are deemed to be too close to the ruling party or the controlling party in Bangladesh. Is that something that is a serious enough condemnation, observation, to stop this happening again? As we said before, Bangladesh and rape, gang rape, individual rape and Bangladesh do not exist together. So rapists must not exist in Bangladesh. This is the shortest kind of statement that can be made. Rape and Bangladesh cannot coexist, must not coexist. And rapists must not be allowed to live in Bangladesh. Now, this message should be considered very carefully, because quite apart from the inherent criminality and destruction of a life, every rape is a destruction of a life, and every perpetration is a perpetration too many. So what the additional repugnance is the fact that in 1971, which the later reports have confirmed, not at the time because the people were too nervous and too uncertain as to what was going on, during the 9 months of 1971. So the details and the facts became kind of documented and published in accessible form after 71. So we know that in 1971, the Pakistan army at the time, occupation army, committed mass and massive numbers of rapes of women, Muslim women in East Pakistan, and Pakistani army was raping Muslim women. Think about that. Pakistani army, Muslim army was raping Muslim women. So it was based on rapes that they tried to occupy our country. And what is happening now, nearly 50 years later? Bangladeshi student league members are raping Bangladeshi women. How is that? So they're repeating what the Pakistani occupation army did. For that reason, it is completely unacceptable on its own, quite apart from the other reasons that rape is unacceptable for. So Bangladesh must eliminate, eradicate rapists and rapes. Full stop. No long debate is necessary. Bangladesh has no place for rapists and rapes. But this simple demand must be seen and heard from the many thousands that are speaking and protesting against the gang rape of the 25th of September 2020. And the college principal, Saleh Ahmad, should be prosecuted as an accomplice. He should be arrested and prosecuted as an accomplice, as should any other member of the MC College staff. MC College was founded with a big-hearted man, by a big-hearted man. But it had a difficult start, and it was luckily picked up. But the man who founded it didn't live to see it. But his memories live on, and MC College is a good thing for the country, has been a good thing for the country. But the founding principles and aims have been contaminated from time to time, even during the Pakistan years, where gangs, so-called student gangs, were not committing rapes, but they were committing other violence and crimes against their rivals or people who didn't belong with their gangs, their particular party gangs. So we condemn all the criminals during the Pakistan time and since the Bangladesh time that have been doing crimes against the image and against the reputation, against the sanctity of the college, MC College. And we condemn that particular gang rape that has taken place as the last one that should be even discussed. There should not be any more, not just rape, but any more crimes that should be talked about. So criminals must be banned from educational institutions, and the learning, the ideals of learning must be established right across the institutions and beyond the institutions across Bangladesh. The ideals of learning, unfettered, free from interference by criminals and criminality. Absolutely free from interference by criminals and criminality must be established immediately across Bangladesh, regardless of who or what party is in control of the policy making in Bangladesh. And anyone who claims to be concerned about Bangladesh, concerned for democracy, concerned for ethics, morality, equality, anyone, if there is anyone, because we have yet to see anyone coming across with this kind of statement from Bangladesh. They have been making statements, but not in this way. If there has been any such statement or a speech, let us see it. But as of now, at this time, which is now 1 minute to 2 GMT in the afternoon of Wednesday, the 30th of September 2020, there has been no such statement. There have been words of jumbled kind of condemnation, words, slogans for justice for the victims of rape, not good enough. We are saying that there must be no rape in Bangladesh. It is a million miles away from, different from what is being said in Bangladesh by any of the people whose statements and speeches and comments we can access via the internet from London, UK. We are saying, stop rape in Bangladesh, full stop. Make Bangladesh no-go area for rapists and rapes. No rapist must live in Bangladesh. No rapist must live in Bangladesh. No rapist must in any way whatsoever associate themselves with the idea of Bangladesh, freedom Bangladesh, liberated Bangladesh. And no rapist must be forgiven in Bangladesh, or no rapist from Bangladesh should be forgiven anywhere. I think this is a very important and clear message. And we shall be continuing to update on this demand and analysis until this policy is established. And it cannot be established without democracy. Democracy, as loosely understood in Bangladesh, must be rigorously understood in Bangladesh. Because democracy has become a kind of style, as a kind of one of the CB's items to be included. Not so. What would have happened if the gang rapists had killed, murdered this woman? Would the protests be different? What would they say? Because many of the victims of rape in Bangladesh are being murdered by their rapists. And many of the rapists in India are murdering their victims, are murdering as of now. And most of the rapes in India are not heard of, not being publicized. And Narendra Modi is quite okay with that, because most of the victims, disproportionately high numbers of the victims of organized intentional rape are Muslims. So Modi, a known offender against Muslims, a known kind of criminal who committed crimes against humanity involving massacres of Muslims, Modi is not making any deal about it. So what was the United Nations Human Rights Council doing this past week, the 75th anniversary of the founding of the United Nations? What was the Human Rights Council doing? Not long after this broadcast, we shall be making a new call separately on a separate platform to the United Nations and to the United Nations Human Rights Council and to its chairperson in detail. The interview published yesterday, I think, on one of the Bangladeshi kind of channels, contained speeches by two, quote, lawyers. They were described as members of the Sylhet bar. And both of them, both men, said that they were very deeply upset and outraged by the gang rape, and that their group has refused to take on the brief to represent any of the arrested criminals or accused rapists. But that doesn't go far enough. They are confining their comments and their outrage to this particular gang rape. But they haven't said anything about the legal kind of system that is supposed to exist in Bangladesh. One of them, the first one shown in the particular clip, deferred to the legal system. But the evidence of the legal system, so-called in Bangladesh, shows that it doesn't protect victims of rape, not anywhere near as rigorously, as thoroughly as it should do. And rapists don't fear the legal system. The reason why they don't is because it is dysfunctional, has been dysfunctional in effect.